Going west. Give this a minute. Well, I thought we were going, people. I had to get out of the rush hour of New Jersey, bumper to bumper traffic, and then we started rolling. I thought we were out of the city site. Apparently we are not. Alrighty. Westbound out of New Jersey. Deadhead. Give it a minute here. Let a couple of bodies get on here. I got one. It has been raining all day today. Light, but raining. Whoa. Right now we are leaving New Jersey westbound on 78. I waited. Crap. Waiting. Dodge lanes, dude. You'll get there faster. Kind of hoping this wasn't going to happen, and here it's happening. Phillipsburg. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 white cars in a row. That looks kind of cool. I'm on Highway 78, Interstate 78 westbound in New Jersey, trying to leave the state, and I thought I had gotten out of the rush hour. Apparently, I was wrong. Even though don't you come over here. Don't you come over here. Apparently, I was mistaken because we're back into it again. But we're not too far from a turn going north towards Phillipsburg, and hopefully that'll get us out of this mess. So anyway, I made my drop this morning at Amazon. It's something about the Amazon warehouse that's totally different from any other warehouse I've been in, was their PPE, personal protective equipment. Some places go steel-toed boots and hard hats and vests and blah, blah, blah. Some places are real lackadaisical. Amazon wears hard hats inside the warehouse, and I have never seen that before. And their forklift operator has their own personal escort. They got a guy who walks around behind him with a flag. I mean, each and every forklift driver has a foot soldier to go with them, which I've never seen that before. But they are ultra organized, and Amazon's factory is ultra clean. Their warehouse is really quite shocking when I got in there. Anyway, I spent the day in a parking lot. After I made my drop, I was running on about 2 hours of sleep. And I pulled into a parking lot to whip a U-turn, and there was a Planet Fitness, of which I'm a member. And I, with no sleep in my system, wasn't really a good time to work out. But I went in and used the shower, and then I came out and slept. And here I am trying to get to Western New York for tomorrow evening. And they all know I need to get, that's a good safety. Yeah, but it's like, I've never seen anything that intense as far as their safety stuff. It was like, that was crazy. That was like off the rails. But the first call that I got for a load, and I'm kind of limited to what I could do because of where I'm going for tomorrow. And they said, hey, we got one goes halfway across Pennsylvania. And I went, all right, perfect. I'll take it. Bit aggressive. That's code for cheap, because I'll take it because I'm going there anyway. Didn't get it. Blah. Then our company's North Carolina office calls and gives me the load I've been asking for 6 months, which is New Jersey to Houston, where I live. And I'm like, seriously? You give it to me now? Seriously? So I said, I can't take it. Got to be in Western New York tomorrow. And then they gave me one more call, and they said, oh, we got something going down to North Carolina. Can't go to North Carolina. Can't do it. I got to go this way. And something about New Jersey I've noticed since I've been driving out here is people drive really aggressive. around here. I mean, they're cutting you off and fighting and clawing to get one car length closer. Because this morning, I was on a secondary road because I set my GPS to dodge toll roads. It's a principle thing. And it's like one lane, the speed limit is like 45, and I'm caught in a line of cars going 60. And then suddenly the road opens up where it's two lanes for a little while, and people start maneuvering like it's the Indy 500 so they can get one car length further and then get back into the ducks in a row and then go back to fighting. And just, oh, God, it was nuts. And it was all the way in. And then, I drive Texas style. I let people merge. I let people cut in front of me. If I'm at an intersection, I'll wave people out of parking lots. And they look at me like I have two heads. But that's kind of how we do it in Texas. It's not this, as my friend used to say, I'm not out here singing opera music. Me, 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 me. It's just the way we do it where I'm from. But I spent the whole day hanging around the parking lot. Didn't want to drive around any more than necessary. So I hit in the parking lot. There was an Afghani restaurant, which I've never been in one. And I had the menu, which meant nothing to me. And the guy said, try this. And it was lamb, shish kebab lamb on a rice bed with they put like a yogurt sauce with it. It was really good. So if you get a chance to try Afghani food, give it a whirl. Anyway, the topic I wanted to babble on today, when I was younger, I would go chase down World War II vets to tell their experiences. And I did that until we've more or less run into World War II vets and some Korean War guys after that. And then just life experiences and little stories. And as a pilot, I have bumped into a whole bunch of guys that used to be in a nefarious flying business back in the day, involving the U.S. border or the Caribbean Sea. And one of the guys that I knew from back in the early 90s, and he died a couple of years ago. He's only 72 years old, which that kind of sucks. But his name was Jack, but everybody called him Yak, Y-A-C-K. And Yak had a long, long career in the marijuana smuggling business. And in time, I got to hear little bits and pieces of his experience in the marijuana smuggling industry. And he was from Farmington, New Mexico, joined the Navy, got out, and in 1967, for some reason, he found himself living in El Paso. And his dad gave him a hand-me-down four-wheel drive International Scout. So he's in El Paso, and they're like, how are you going to earn a living? And then somebody saw his four-wheel drive, which weren't as common back then as they are today. And someone says, I got a way you can make some money. And they got in with him, and he drove out in the desert, crossed the border of Mexico, and picked up a few hundred pounds of marijuana and brought it back. This is kind of when it was unheard of in the day. And, he said as they're crossing the border, the Mexican army appears and starts firing automatic weapons at him. He didn't know it at the time, but they weren't trying to shoot him. They were trying to scare him. They're not going to hit you. They're just going to fire in your direction. Hey, Jordan, what's up? And Shauna Robinson, yeah, that's the other one. All right. They said they're firing at him. They didn't hit him, but they weren't trying to. And he said he got scared after that. But his goal, this is 1967, his goal was to make $8,000 because he could buy this car he wanted in this little house he had picked out. And, boom, he made his 8,000. So he goes, well, let's push it to 10,000. So I got a little bit of reserve. Boom, 10,000. Okay. Let's go for 100,000. Boom. And as time goes on, it went to 1 million, and it went to 10 million, to 100 million. And that is something of all the people I've ever met that were in the drug business was no, in amount of time, you'll have everything you need. You'll have the house, you'll have the car, you'll have the toys, you'll have everything you need, but you'll never have enough money. And it doesn't matter what you got, it's never enough. And they would find themselves addicted to the game, addicted to the process, the plan, the mission. And that they weren't doing it to make money. They were doing it because they liked the planning. And I get that. It's kind of how the human nature works. But anyway, he got into this business, and it was the 1970s when he started doing his heyday. And right after they got shot at that very first time, he said after that he wouldn't drive. They were starting to use like planes. And the last generation of passenger planes that were propeller driven before they went to the jet, I think the first commercial jet that was widestream was a 707. He said there was a DC-4, DC-6, and I honestly don't know the difference. They carry a little over 100 passengers, and one of the complaints about those planes back then from passengers, they were loud. The propellers, they're just really, really loud. They insulate the cabins, but still the sound would resonate through the airframe. So once the jets started becoming common, those aircraft got cast aside and were turned into cargo birds, cargo planes, and small countries, small airlines used them. And these guys were going to go for a big move in the early 70s, so they got their DC-6, bought it for very little, stripped out seats, stripped out the floor, stripped out the insulation, and basically gutted the aircraft to save on space and to save on weight. And they did a run from central Mexico to the Arizona desert. And this airplane had 35,000 pounds of marijuana in it. It took 3 tractor-trailer trucks to hold the payload. And he's out in the desert waiting on this plane late at night, and they put out lanterns. That's how they did it back in the day. They would lay out lanterns to mark the LZ, the runways. It says you're in the middle of nowhere. And if you've ever been out in the desert at night, a dry climate like that, when you talk, it sounds like you're yelling, even though you're not. Sound travels. So they're out there in the dark. They're whispering because, they're doing something underhanded, illegal, and sneaky. So everybody's whispering. Everybody's whispering. About 2 weeks away, you hear this plane coming, this roaring sound of this 4-engine plane. He says that thing finally lands and it taxis up, and you couldn't hear yourself scream if you had to. It was so loud. It pulls up and they shut the motors off. And the guy that was standing next to him looked over and yelled at the top of his lungs, "I'm certainly glad we were quiet out here." And they unloaded that, sent the plane back across the border, loaded. But he talked about later on into the 80s when they started tightening up the border. They had to get away from big planes and go to little planes, which was a Cessna single engine, Cessna 210 and a 206. Basically the same aircraft, except one has retractable landing gear and one doesn't. And the one that doesn't can carry more weight, but the one that does goes faster. So it depends. So the 206 was the more common one. The pilots like to use the fixed landing gear. And he said the tactics they ended up coming up with, the same concept. You land with lanterns, but when you put the plane on the ground, you had to unload it, carry 800 pounds, he said. That was the load. You could get it out pretty quick. But they had a person, the job was the designated drunk driver. That person would just sit there in a big car and drink. And if the police showed up or Border Patrol showed up or some kind of law enforcement agency, his job was to go crash into him because he was just a drunk driver, doesn't know anything about what's going on there. And I thought that tactic was interesting, that was something they kept in their back pocket. And some of the tactics they used over the years, again, every time it's like baseball. You hit them where they ain't, as they say. It's when they started tightening up, they would move. They would start flying somewhere else. They tightened up the Mexican border in an area. They would fly out across the Gulf of America, as they call it now. They'd fly out over the water and go out there where they weren't looking. And they'd move out there and they'd go back to the landmass. Well, one of the tactics they ended up doing towards the end of his career in the 80s, when they stopped doing it, was they would fly out into the Pacific a distance in the mornings, and they would come up behind Catalina Island. And there was a bunch of rich people that have little planes. They would pop up from Catalina Island and fly in to LA every day. They'd fly home in the evenings. Well, they would be coming from the west behind Catalina low, and they'd pop up over the island, and then they'd climb up and appear on a radar screen, and they would just get in with the wall of aircraft that were flying that route. and they would just kind of blend in with it and go into LA and unload. And they said that worked for quite a while until other smuggler pilots found out about it. And one of them, some of the smuggling outfits were not well organized, and these guys were one of those. And their pilot flew behind Catalina Island and was coming from the west and slammed into the mountain. So eventually they found the wreckage with the pilot and the load of marijuana, and they started putting one and two together and realized that's what they were doing. So suddenly that whole operation got shut down. Exciting journey. What's up, mister? So once that that shut that avenue down, and he got to a point where he had the money he needed. He actually got out of the business. And then years later, they came after him on a conspiracy charge. And anytime you see the word conspiracy, that means we didn't actually catch you doing anything, but we really want to get you in some legal trouble for it. Butterfly, hey, he's back. Hey, what's up? He said, we really want to get you in legal trouble. And how I explain conspiracy laws to people is you're sitting at your dinner table eating with your family, and the police knock on your door and hand you a speeding ticket. And you're looking at them, and they go, oh, well, you have a Mustang GT in your driveway. Okay. Well, obviously, at some point you were speeding. Okay. So you go to trial. They present their evidence. You own a Mustang GT. Here is an engineer from Ford explaining how the engine works. And here's a guy from Firestone talking about how great the tires are on the car. And here's a guy from the highway department talking about the quality of the roads. And here's a dude from the weather service talking about on that day that they're saying you were speeding. This was the weather conditions. You should have been doing that. Although here's their ace in the hole. Your next door neighbor got caught speeding, and he was going 85 miles an hour. And in exchange to drop his speeding ticket, he's willing to testify that you were going 120. And he wouldn't lie about it because, he's only getting his ticket tossed out. And then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, look at this nice car that he owns. And he's flaunting his wealth with your face. And he's never had a speeding ticket because he's so sneaky. And that's kind of how conspiracy works. You didn't actually get caught doing anything, but you could have. And we'll show you all the scenarios of how. And that's literally how he ended up getting in legal trouble, was a conspiracy charge, which is kind of a weird way of, wow, really? And there was another guy I met. He was actually he's in Key West. I think he's still down there, to be honest with you. This guy walked, let me say that again, he walked from Seattle to Key West. That is the extreme northwest to the extreme southeast part of the United States. And he ended up Key West, and he works as a tour guide down there. But in the 80s, he did house sitting. He's just a professional laid-back dude. He did house sitting. And somewhere in the Caribbean, some rich guy owned an island he's out of New York, owned an island, and he just kept an eye on the place while they'd come down 2-3 times a year, and they would call and say, hey, we're coming down. He'd get stocked with food and everything. And when they would show up, he'd kind of disappear. And then when he would leave, he'd clean up afterwards, and he'd go back to garden the place. So he had like this big mansion he got to live in by himself. It had a marina and it had a boat dock. A marina and it had a runway, but they would come down in their plane. Well, moving into the 1980s, airplanes. He pulled a Forrest Gump, exactly. In the 1980s, early 80s, he said airplanes would just randomly land on that strip in the middle of the night, get downloaded to a boat at the marina, and leave. And he'd report this. And finally, one day, they put a big they showed up on the dock, and they put a giant concrete block in the middle of the runway. They marked it with warning lights. And he said, and then a few days later, a boat shows up with a tractor, drags the concrete block out of the way, and another airplane lands. He goes, that didn't work. So he called and let them know what was going on. And a DC-6, a big old prop jaw plane, landed way after the era of the old, whoa, it bumps. way after the era of big planes, and people got off and they were armed. So he called, but he left the building to hide because he didn't know what was about to go down. So he ran out in the sand dunes and hid. And the next day, the Coast Guard, the Panamanian people showed up, and the airplane was still sitting there. And they were gone, but the airplane was abandoned on the ramp. So they went digging around, and it turns out the airplane had been leased from a company, a cargo company somewhere, and they were tracing it down who owned it, who was the person who leased this plane. And in the world of aviation, you run a commercial Part 135 or Part 141, you can't do it online. You can't do it .com. You have to have an actual office, a physical office. And your company might, I'm just making up words here. If your name is Maverick, your investment firm, your flying company is a DBA, doing business at, how about grand jury proceeding, secret zero. Yeah, exactly. That's how grand juries work. But your company is DBA, doing business as, and by mere coincidence, the company that leased this bird, the DBA, was Debbie Blue Aviation. Well, that was creative. And it had an address. They go to the address, they look through the glass window, and it's an empty office. Part 135. Part 141, 135, and there's another one. I don't remember the other ones. But yeah, your license that you operate. But this, I don't even know, the rent lease for hire. But so there was nothing behind it. And then there was this big legal battle of getting their plane back. Those kind of things kind of cracked me up. I met a pilot, another pilot. He had a twin engine plane. I don't remember what it was, but he upped the horsepower in it, and he flew down to Colombia and got a load back when Colombian marijuana was kind of a thing. And they grossly overloaded the runway, and he's pulling back on the yoke, and nothing's happening. It's coming off the ground, and he's into triple digits, still on the ground. And here comes the end of the runway in the trees, and there is this thing in aircraft. It's called in-ground effect. Unscheduled, okay. In-ground effect. And he said he just reached down and snatched the landing gear up. He's still on the ground, mind you, but he just snapped the gear up, and the plane didn't fall. He's like, okay, that's a good sign. And it reduced his drag, and he was able to climb out. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Did a few runs. There was a guy, he flew into the mid-'80s. His last name was Lightchest. Wrote a book about him. They had Cessna 310s, which aren't very large, but they up the power and up the fuel cells in them. And this dude would go to Colombia, load up, and fly out into the Atlantic Ocean, like 500 miles east of the Caribbean, and fly up the east coast of the United States, and then turn inbound, duck down, turn in, and pop up in Pennsylvania and go to, I believe, Scranton. So they were that plane was in the air for 12 hours. You'd fly down, spend the night, pick up a load, fly back, and was going completely around the interdiction. And they got away with that for years until someone snitched them out. But I've met a lot of these guys and talked to them, and they'll start telling war stories that are adventurous and fun. The cocaine guys, it was a little more serious. The marijuana guys, it was kind of more of a cowboy sporting event, whatnot. There was one dude, and he looked like a cross between a hippie and a homeless dude, and his name was Flash. And Flash had a 206, and he would do marijuana runs across the border back in the 70s. And the police knew about him. They knew of him. They knew about him. But once you're kind of know it's time to stop, but he just kept going. And he did an 800-pound run, flew a load in, landed on a road, unloaded in a ditch, took off, went to a local airport, and the feds are waiting on him. And they jumped him, and of course there was nothing on board. And they said that right in front of all the witnesses, the one agent went to his car, grabbed a bale of marijuana and threw it in his plane and said, confiscate the plane. And they arrested him. He got bonded out. He went home. He grabbed a propeller and a wrench and a pair of bolt cutters. And he knows where they hold the airplanes that get confiscated. Went straight to it. The propeller's been taken off. He puts the new prop on, cuts the lock, and he flies the plane off. They go to court. They get the charge thrown out because there's too many witnesses that watched him throw the bag in it. He says, okay, give him his plane back. Well, we don't have it. Where is it? I'm not sure. And they asked that whatever this guy's name was, everybody called it Flash. They said, what kind of plane was it, Flash? Oh, it was a 206. And these are old workhorses. These are worn out, beat up, just, beat to death airplanes. But no, okay, you're going to have to replace this plane. Can you describe it? So he goes into details about this brand new, freshly overhauled, full instrumentation, Mac Black limited edition engine, blah, 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 blah. And they had to replace it to his specs. Yeah, they didn't like him. Hold on a second here. I'm looking at my GPS and it's zigzagging me all around weird places here. Well, this is interesting. All right, I don't know why it's taking me off the highway, but it's taking me off the highway. Anyway, I'm just taking a lazy drive right now. They did electronics, hired kickers. Oh yeah, well the airplane was too small. They also put one thing the feds did. If they had a suspected plane, they called it up. They put a transponder on board, but they called it a puck because it looked like a hockey puck, and they would throw it in your gas tank. And he goes, and people would say, okay, we found the puck. He goes, the puck? And he goes, what about the rest of them? He's like, what do you mean? They started looking, and they would find 8 of them, and they would literally, they throw it in the gas tank, and they had some that wouldn't go off until you got to a certain altitude. And, there was all kinds of stuff they had to deal with. There was a time a guy I talked to that landed out in the desert, and they had a trailer, a trailer being towed behind one of their trucks to throw the bales in, and for some reason one of the guys bent down and picked and saw a tracking bug, which back then it was the size of your fist. It wasn't like a little air tag, and he said, we got a bug, and he handed it to one of the guys who had a car there, and he said, make this disappear, and the guy took off and came back later, and he said, where'd you put it? He goes, we stuck it on a U-Haul truck that was sitting at a gas station. I go, all right, well, later on, this guy gets popped, and the agents that are taking him to jail he said there's smoke coming out of their ears as they're driving, and he's like, why are they mad? Because he actually knows these guys, and he says, hey, where'd that puck end up? And he said both of these guys spun around swiveled their heads around and screamed, Kansas City, at the top of their lungs, because apparently it was a family that had moved here from Japan, and they chased them all the way to Kansas City and then raided their trailer and raided their house, and it caused oh, you're mean. It cost them all kinds of money, and just it was it's part of the game, though. I mean, again, we're talking the 1980s. Jack, specifically Yak, had you remember the Grand National, the Buick Grand National, or the Grand Nasty as they called it? He had one of those, and for the time, why do I always pick the lane with the truck in it? The Grand Nasty was a really fast car for its era, and they said they got federal agents following them. So they pull off, they go outside of El Paso to the west, and they go into a gas station, and they used to put big maps on the wall. This, before GPS and everything. And he goes, there's this big map, and he knows these federal agents are following him. So they're in there talking, and when they walk in behind them, they put their finger on the map. They're pointing, way to the west. Okay, something, and they're talking and pointing and talking and pointing, and they go, okay, so now they see where we're going, and they get back in their car, and they get out on the road, and they just let this car rip. They get it going as fast as it can. They completely outrun the federal agents, get off the next exit, hide under the overpass, let them go by, and then drive back into town. And just send them off into Never Never Land. Just, give them something to do. Uh, the people you meet. What are we doing here? I got 2 miles and I'm getting off to, I don't know why this is putting me on this secondary road. Again. Uh, Go, man. Show getting off on the right. I'll get over on the right. There was a guy that was being followed. He was in a light plane. I still keep an Atlas on my. Oh, I've got a satellite old school GPS. I have my phone with Waze, which I can use, and I have a big Atlas under the seat here. I actually haven't used it recently. And my mother, who's insane, likes to collect maps. So I always grab road maps at the rest areas for her. I got a New Jersey map now. Ha! Never had one before. Yeah, before you go on a drive, you want to look at your map. You want to see what's coming before you head out and be surprised. Again, I don't know why this is taking me through the woods like this. Stale green. This guy, if oh crap. Didn't see that coming. All right. If you look at airspace at a big airport, a big uh, major international airport, and I got some trivia for you. What does it take for an airport to be an international airport? Nobody ever gets this one. What do you have to have on site to get certified? The one piece of equipment that needs to be there to make you an international airport, because you can go to JFK, LaGuardia, Chicago O'Hare, DFW, international airports. I have been to Hobbs, New Mexico, which barely has paved runways, and they're an international airport. So what do you have to have on site? Does anybody know? This is Jeopardy. This is a $400 question. Okay, you ready? An incinerator. You can call customs. They'll show up, but you got to have an incinerator on site. Anyway, you go to a big airport, Class B airspace, which the airspace is like a wedding cake. Big on the bottom, you get higher and it gets smaller. Now flip that upside down. That's Class B airspace. So if the closer you get to the airport, if you start descending, you can actually go under the airspace. But there's a point when you're in it. And ironically, the least busy place in Class B airspace is directly over the airport, because everybody's taking off and landing this way and that way, but in the middle of the airport is completely empty. So if you transition the airspace and you say, hey, can I boogie? Can I transition? Sometimes there's published routes, sometimes give you clearance. They will literally route you over the middle of the runway, right? The middle of everything. And the DFW airport, which goes on for days, the helicopter route goes right down the middle of the airport, right over the control tower. And I've actually been on that a couple of times on that route. So this guy had, this was not too many years ago. There is a device they're now putting in aircraft, which it's called a TCAS, which is a terminal collision avoidance system. It's basic. It looks kind of like, well, the one I had was a PCAS. It was a portable collision. It looked like a radar detector you put on the dashboard, and it's looking for radar contacts that flash transponder codes around you. So you're flying along, Arizona Steve here again, 110 today. Well, right now it's 63 in New Jersey and raining, and I'm back off the highway again. So the transponder, back in the day, a radar would hit an aircraft and you'd get a flashback. And now your radar is designed to hit the transponder, which is your little box that tells you who you are. And it does what's called an interrogation. It's like asking you, who are you? And then it sends back a code. And that code is being picked up by the PCAS or the TCAS, depending on what you have. And so you look over at it, it would flash, and it would say a direction and a height. Arrow. Okay, the aircraft is 4 miles away, 300 feet above you. The aircraft is 2 miles away and 700 feet below you, and you would set the parameters. Well, this guy did a load. He flew, this is not many years ago, flew across the Caribbean, got into Florida, and there is a, hold on a second here. Whoa. I actually needed a turn there. Well, that didn't work. I guess I'm rerouting. Anyway, he noticed that his TCAS was showing an aircraft that was steady. It was behind him. No cash, easy cash, bill by mail. Yeah, that's why he was trying to route me away from here. And he noticed that it was a steady. It was behind him, above him, and it was steady. It didn't. It never changed. So he drifted a little bit, like 10 degrees. So he did, and then the heading changed a little bit, and then it fell back in. So he knows he's being followed. He goes, okay. He goes over to whoa, dude. Oh, cool bridge. Yeah, 33 north. Hold on a second here. Hold on, I'm trying to watch my dash. So he knows he's being followed. There's somebody behind him. So he gets over and he went up to Raleigh-Durham Airport, which has a gigantic, oh, there's a state line, which has a gigantic Class B airspace. And he calls for a clearance to cut through the airspace because he's only like 3,000 feet off the ground. And the airspace is a lot higher than in Raleigh-Durham. And the aircraft that's following him is going to have to do it also. So the guy's going to come up on the radio. I mean, he's going to have to say something. So he's listening and he watches, and the guy doesn't come up on the radio. And all of a sudden, that aircraft starts climbing and changing direction because he announced what he wanted to do: cut across the middle of the airport and pop out the other side and keep going north. And he's listening, and he's listening to approach control. And the other plane doesn't say anything. He's just going to go around and meet him on the other side. He goes, "Okay, here's where it goes." He flies halfway across the airport, gets over the middle of the airport. The air traffic controller hands him off to the guy on the other side of the airport and gives him a frequency change. So for a moment in time, he's in no man's land. So he didn't switch frequencies. He just stayed on that frequency over the middle of the airport in Raleigh-Durham, slowed down, stomped it, got his aircraft into a flat spin and descended directly over the airport, rolled out, and then turned in a different direction and dove off the airport property, and then got down low and started following a highway in a completely different direction. They didn't catch him doing it. He turned his transponder off all at the same time, and the guy he's getting handed off to doesn't know he's going there because he didn't call him. And that plane that was following him doesn't know where he went. All of a sudden he was going this way, and all of a sudden he's gone because there's all kinds of aircraft in that airspace. And I was like, dude, that's brutal. And he goes, that's how you get rid of a follower. That was hardcore. And he ended up flying up to Pennsylvania, and he landed he found a little airport, real quiet airport, had one runway. And he goes, the trick is one runway, no taxiway. I went, why is that? He goes, you land and you stop in the middle of the runway. So if there's an airplane following you, they can't land. You just block it. So, and if there's all of a sudden an airplane shows up and starts circling, he's waiting for you. So you sit there until he runs out of gas, and then you refuel yourself while you're sitting and take back off again. He said there's all kinds of little tactics like that these people talk about. And it was, to me, it was interesting to listen to. These guys, sometimes they were sitting together talking, and they would go over little knickknacks. Okay, so here's what happened. Hey, like Mr. Steve had a nice and warm Arizona. I made my delivery this morning. Went to an Amazon facility, which is freakishly clean and organized. Waited around all day, had a couple of false reports, and now I am deadheading, kind of zigzagging. I'm now in Pennsylvania, and I'm zigzagging towards western New York. I'm not going to make it tonight, and I'm not going to push to make it tonight because maybe something will pop up. So I'm going to go here for a while, and then I'm going to hole up somewhere and spend the night. And when I was going last night to make my delivery, I went to get as close as possible, and there was a pilot. And on the app, this is something you really need to do. How many parking spaces do they have? And it's for big trucks. If it says 150, you're going to have a big, glorious place to hide out. If it says less, it can be a challenge. And the one I went to said 15. Well, I got there, and there wasn't a whole lot of non-big truck parking spaces, and there was nowhere to hide the van, literally nowhere. So I continued driving, and I came across a strip mall. And if you see a business, like an individual proprietor, single business, and you go to park in their parking lot, they're going to know you don't belong there because it's their parking lot. But if you go to a strip mall, everybody assumes you're there because of somebody else's business, if that makes sense. And I was driving by this is a really nice area I was cutting through. And there was a strip mall with fancy bushes and stuff. So the parking lot wasn't just solid. It was kind of broken up. And there were a handful of vans, white vans that these businesses owned. And I swing in there and I just park right next to them. You just act like you're one of those. And even though there's logos on this van, people don't see that. All they see is the van with other vans. So they won't even really look that hard at it. So I just pulled in there and put on my blinders and went to sleep for about 4 hours. And then I got up and finished the ride into Jersey. And that's when I found the way people drive in New Jersey was a little bit disheartening. With that exception back there, I dodged toll roads. That was my fault. But we were going through the woods. This is coming out of a really nice area, too. It's a 2-lane road. Speed limit was 40. I was caught in a wall of traffic going 60 on this 2-lane. And every once in a while, it would open up and give you like a passing lane, and everybody started zigzagging and just, it was insane. You can also pull into hotel parking lot. There's always cars there, nobody knows. Yeah, that's the thing. Hotels are good. That's also a good place to use a restroom. You walk into find a 5-star hotel, just walk in and walk right by the staff like you own the place and turn down the hall. You'll find a nice restroom in there. I had one guy question me, and I said, I'm meeting somebody here, and I look around like I'm looking for him, and I go, by the way, you have a restroom? They're like, oh yeah, around the corner. Go use it and leave. I've done that a bunch of times. Small airports, by the way, that's a good place to hang out, because people park vehicles at little airports and leave them there for a week at a time, so nobody will look at you. Back on a highway again, or something. All right, looks like I get to come up here in 21 miles and get back on 80. My favorite. I am still on the board, or get up the next morning and go inside and have their home breakfast. I tell you what, I haven't tried that using the buffet, but I wonder if we get away with that. I wonder that would be ballsy. Okay, now you got me thinking. How do you? Yeah, now you got me thinking. Go use their buffet in the morning. Wow. You better have a song and dance, though, or look a certain way, or be dressed a certain way. Come in a side door or something. Don't walk through the front. Yeah, I like that one. Well, I got to do 20 miles up this road, and then I'm hoping it hits 80. And it looks like right there. Okay. And then we'll be back on 80. Easy. Walking into the hotel, get on the elevator, go up a few floors, then come back down, and you've been there all night. But you got to walk right in front of them. If you could get in a side door or something, that would probably... It sounds like you've done this before. That's what I'm hearing. That sounds like you tried that. When I was driving once, I went into a business office to use their restroom, and you walk up it was like an 8-story building. And I walk in, and the bottom floor restroom was locked. It had like a big lock on it. I was like, I ain't falling for that. And I got on the elevator, went to the top floor. Then we found unlocked bathrooms. Kind of how operation you guys running here? So, yeah, you. Jeez. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I'm gonna have to keep that in the back of my mind. The buffet line thing. That's why I said the taco truck is the adult version of the ice cream truck. Taco truck, taco truck, taco truck. And chase it. Well, minus transitioning New Jersey to go to New York to come back out for the Cannonball. That was the first time I've ever actually put my feet on the ground in New Jersey in my life. Surprisingly nice area, though. Uh, Being that I'm not in a hurry to get anywhere, I've actually got my cruise set on 60. Right below. I like, oh, heck yeah. They in Houston, they have an area, it's a parking lot that's just for taco trucks in the downtown area. You'll drive there and there'll be 5 different ones or 6, and sometimes they're tacos and sometimes they're other things. But the parking lot is literally just for taco trucks. And they're extremely popular. And it has been raining all freaking day today. Have some air going. Ooh. So it's what, Wednesday, Thursday? I got to be at the cousin's house tomorrow at some point, and then I go pick up the wifey poo at the airport in Pittsburgh on Friday. And I've been having to explain why I have her big hat hanging, her big sun hat hanging up in the back of the van. It's a little light in the loafers, but it's her hat because I'm gonna bum my cousin has a fleet of vehicles, and I'm gonna bum his Mustang convertible. I got a taco truck in the Mayor's parking lot. Really, I'm looking forward to doing 70. I think people speed limit is just a suggestion. Yeah, there's a lot of places like that. The speed limit is just vague. This is hurricane season. Yeah, you got a big one going off the coast over there. Yeah, that one, Helen or Helene or whatever, that one's spinning around right now. I remember years ago, I had a friend of the family. They were living in New York and they were going on vacation to Myrtle Beach. And it was one of those Cat 5 hurricanes coming in towards Myrtle Beach. And they were getting ready to get in the car and start driving. I said, there's a hurricane coming in, right? They go, oh, well, we're driving the heavy vehicle. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, go for it. That 175-mile-an-hour wind will have no effect on your, quote, heavy vehicle. Knock yourself out. They ended up not going. Could not believe they said that. Oof, some people's kids. Anyway, talked to the wife today. She's packing. She's getting ready to go. She's getting excited. When you have vineyards, it's like when you have kids. You do everything after school season's over. During the summer, you do your vacations and you do this and you do that. When you're in the vineyards and you've got wine grapes and Concord grapes, everything is, quote, after grapes. We're gonna do blah 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 after grapes, which is October, so we're getting close. You think disc golf oh, that would be interesting. That would be interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. The winds and stuff. I flew a Bell 407 in the Gulf for quite a few years. The 407 is a really fast aircraft. And I had one contract. It was way out deep, a place called Green Canyon. And the particular aircraft I flew was kind of a freak of nature. It was faster than the other ones. And your VNE, which is velocity never to exceed for the rotor system, was 140 knots. And Those 407s cruising at 120, 125. This one would do 135. This one would do 135, pick a 140. So you actually had to keep an eye on your indicated airspeed. You'd have to back off on the power. It was just a oddball bird. This one I flew. And I flew to the beach and had to wait around for some parts. It was late in the day, and I had to go back out to the platform, and the winds were absolutely howling that day. And I had to get an extension on downtime, which is the limits of how late we can fly. And I'm going out, and I'm picking up a tailwind. I'm picking up beyond what we're supposed to be flying in weather conditions, tailwind. And I'm scooting along, and my ground speed, which is your indicated airspeed plus the mass of air you're moving in, was 208 knots. And I've got this thing down, and I called the platform, and I said, "Hey, have you guys ever seen a 200 knot helicopter?" They're like, "No, I know we have." And I said, "Come outside." And they went out back, and I dove down, and I went by that platform and just got down about 150 feet off the ground, off the water, and went, whoosh. "Hey, Daystor, what's up?" Went shooting past them, and then I pulled up, and because of the speed of it, the momentum, the thing climbed. Like, whoa, dude, pick a lane. Stop playing with your phone, which is exactly what he's doing. Anyway, went shooting past this guy, pulled up, did a massive climb, came around and landed. And when I set down the deck, it was like 60 knots of wind. And I called him on the radio and I said, "Hey, can you guys come tie me down? I don't want to roll the throttle up. I don't want to get blown off up here." Because I was scared. The wind was so strong. We tied it down and I shut the aircraft down. And as soon as the blade stopped, I used a rotor brake. As soon as I got the rotor stopped, it sounds like somebody's playing musical instruments. I'm looking around. I get out, have to fight to get the socks on the rotor tips and tie everything down. And I turn around and they have a giant crane. And the crane is being held by these cables, these big long cables. And the wind going through the cables was so strong, it sounded like somebody was an orchestra and fired up. It was really a weird experience. But that's the windiest I ever got to fly around at 60 knots, 60, 65 knots of wind. But yeah, something as light as a disc, that's going to make it a challenge. Anyway, I'm heading up here and it's showing getting off on 80. Cool. That's what I want to be on. How low does a helicopter hold up in the wind? Well, a helicopter is producing wind itself. And I was talking about this the other day. A helicopter is a balancing act. And if you're flying along in a helicopter and somebody reaches over and opens the window, the pilot feels it. If you lean forward to take your wallet out of your pocket, the pilot feels it. The aircraft is subject to being kicked around by winds and conditions around you. It's just the nature of the balancing act of the helicopter. When you're flying, it's a little better, but you're hovering, it's very, very nervous. But yeah, this wind in general, the reason they had limitations to the winds and the wave heights was a 10-foot wave height. An offshore platform has different decks, and what they call the plus 10 deck is where the boats come up. And if the waves are crashing over the plus 10, that means there's more than 10-foot seas. They wouldn't let us fly out there. Because if you have an engine failure, look at the clouds cutting the mountain off in front of us. If you have an engine failure and you have to auto-rotate in, you might do a successful landing, but if you go down into one of those troughs, your rotor system's going to hit the wave. And you're going to have some problems. So once the waves exceeded 10 feet, the companies wouldn't fly you out there. That was just one of their little safety things. And the day when I went to drink in 2002, it was dead calm. In 14 years of offshore flying, I remember 3 days that it was dead calm. One of them was the day I ended up in the water, which was wonderful. Wow. Look at all those clouds, that fog cloud layer just chops that mountain off right there. That looks kind of cool from here. Anyway, we're back in Pennsylvania, currently showing northbound, zigzagging up here to 80, and I think we're going to drive back across Pennsylvania on 80, which is where I came this way. I like 86 in New York. It's very picturesque. It's kind of like this, but with less houses. And I enjoyed that ride, too. But I'm not trying to get too far tonight because I'm not that big of a rush, and there's a possibility they might find something for me. It could happen. Notice they have no height markings on this bridge. That frustrates me. Right that turn. Anyway, going through life, I tell people this, I tell young people this, make friends with weirdos. Normal people are boring. Find some weirdos to hang out with. They're more fun. They're more entertaining. They have more interesting life experiences. And throughout my life, it seems like everybody I make a friend of mine is a weirdo. In which case, you should meet my wife. Not only a weirdo, she's a redhead, which makes it worse. Okay, here we go. Yeah, my cousin and his wife. What is his wife to me? My cousin-in-law? I don't know what she is. They came down with the flu or something the last couple of weeks. The flu, based on the description, I think they had mad cow disease because my cousin was knocked out for 2 weeks and she was knocked out for 10 days. And they're just now coming out of it and they're finally functional. There was a little iffiness if we were going to. You know I'm talking about you. I used to fly for a short period of time. I was the backup pilot for Fox 26 in Houston. And we used to fly the 407 into the station. And Fox 26 is the biggest channel, the biggest TV station in the Houston area. And you ever see those talking heads for the news? You don't really think about it. But if you look at them on camera, it looks perfectly normal. If you look at them in person, they're wearing what is called clown makeup. Their makeup is so thick, it looks silly. If you walked around in public like that, people would just start laughing at you. But you lean over to the camera, and they look totally normal. And you look back at a person, and it looks like they look like clowns. And I've never understood how the camera hides all that, but they cake this stuff on. And if you look at people on the news, watch their foreheads, because as the color goes into their scalp, it changes to a lighter color. They always darken so there's no reflection, but you can see the line if you're looking for it. I used to get a kick out of that. And I flew with a guy who had been a news anchor in San Antonio. He did it for 25 years and he retired and he got into flying. And what his name was Bob Salter. Little Bob, he's still around. The problem with Bob being a news anchor is he talked like it and he couldn't turn it off. So I would walk in a room and go, "Hey Bob, how you doing?" And he said, "I'm doing just fine. You gonna be doing some flying today?" "Well, yes, I am." And then he would bob his head when he talked, for emphasis. And he just couldn't turn it off because he talked in radio voice. I never did that. We had we went to one call for a fire to get some shots of it. The guy in the back, the camera guy, he was called the gunner, or I called him the gunner at least, the camera guy. And we're coming back, and over on the passenger side of the cockpit, you would have sometimes a news person would get in there. It was kind of unusual. And there was a camera mounted on the center console up high, and you could move it around. It's nice roads. And over on the floor by the knees of the passenger, there was a TV monitor, computer monitor that was broken into 4 quadrants. One was what was on TV right now on that station. Another was in the studio, and one was what the guy in the back seat was looking at. And we're flying along. We caught a high-speed chase. Excuse me. And a high-speed chase is the bread and butter of the news industry, of the local news. Everybody loves a high-speed chase. So I called the station. I said we got a live one going, and I get the gunner onto it, and all of a sudden on that screen it pops up in the corner. It's being shown over the TV show in the corner. Then they go to the station. Then they go live. Then they come up on us, and they start asking questions. The problem is we don't have a news person. I don't have one of the talking heads next to me. So I grab the camera's on me, and they're talking to me, what's going on. And I said, okay, we're north 59. We stumbled on this high-speed chase. It was like a stretched out crew cab 1-ton truck, and it had a bunch of boxes in the back plus a tarp over it. EJ, different butterfly, EJ, different with etc. differently. R22 Chinook. Well, yeah, I mean, there's going to be different effects, but still, the movements. I mean, a Chinook's kind of a. The Chinook is 2 palm trees fornicating in a dumpster. But yeah, it's going to be a little different if it's that large, but still, as far as an R22 goes, I can't even sit in one of those things. I don't fit. But this truck was zigzagging on the lanes, and the guy at the station said, "How did this chase get started?" And I said, "I don't know, but we all know how it's going to end." At which point, this guy took an off ramp, one of those 270-degree turn off ramps, and he didn't make it. And he flipped this truck over a bunch of times, and the guy went shooting out the window, and he was skipping across the ground, the grass on his rear end, just like a rock on water. And I said out loud, "Oh, that's going to leave a mark." And then the guy rolled up into a ball, and they arrested him. And that went out over the air, and that ended up going nationwide because people love high-speed chases. Love them. Yeah, you're going to have some effect, but still, a Chinook is a much more stable aircraft, and they said that you got 2 engines and 5 transmissions, and you want them to be leaking oil because that proves they have oil in them. That was kind of the ongoing joke. And I flew Cobras, and a Chinook could outrun us. I mean, decidedly outrun us. That's one thing that was embarrassing about that. We were supposed to be his escort. We couldn't even hang. Okay, I got a branch off here on North 33 Hazelton. Difference. Also, what had, as far as handling effect, the height of your mast. These older birds, like a Jet Ranger, Long Ranger, has a really, really tall mast, so there's a pendulum effect. And you look at like a Hughes 500 that's got the little stubby mast, and you're holding the controls and you roll your eyeballs to the left, and the aircraft's at a 90-degree banking turn. That I found out the hard way. And as a pilot flying offshore, you got to learn real quick how to make your aircraft run when it won't. Just ways of faking it. We had an A-star. They always seem to have a bald spot in the starter. You hit the starter and absolutely nothing happens, but it had to be in this precise location. Okay, North 33 Hazel. Hold on a second here. And yeah, that's exactly what that was, the 500s. Those are also tiny airframes. Teeny tiny birds, but when they were designed, everybody was 5'6" and weighed 135 pounds. It's just, there's no room inside those things. And the biggest hang up, they're sexy looking airframes, and I've been in a few of them, and they're fun, but their fuel tank is like half a gallon. I mean, you can't go anywhere with them. That's another one of the problems. Oh, and if you auto rotate wrong, they'll tear up pretty bad. All right, I'm following this. All right, exit. No. Okay, 3 miles down here. I'm sorry, I'm looking out the windows here. I had to pull over. I can get gas. All right, back on the bit. Cool, mister. the Magnum PI chopper. Yeah, that aircraft, the one in Magnum PI, was actually used for a tour company out there, and they stayed in business for quite some time. I think they retired those because, again, you can only carry, if you're lucky, you can carry 3 people, and it's very cramped. And they went to A stars because they all face forward, whereas like a 407, you've got some seats facing backwards, which nobody wants to face backwards on the tour. Yeah, I flew tours at the Grand Canyon for a couple of years, which means I took off the Grand Canyon West Airport and I flew a 12-minute loop, plus or minus 15 seconds. So I got to tell the same jokes and the same trivia with the same enthusiasm every 12 minutes. Hey, where are you from? Yeah, this is awesome, man. You got the best job in the world. Yeah, because that rock is so different from the last time I was here 12 minutes ago. Yeah, this is great. This is wonderful. Oh, round and round and round and round. But my passengers enjoyed it, so that's all that really matters. Your height. I knew a 6'7" F-111 pilot side by side. Yeah, I'm 6'4". I can tell you the F-14 Tomcat, you literally had to be 6 foot plus to fly it. The cockpit was designed for a tall person. Helicopters, not so much. When I flew long rangers and jet rangers, you know that big puffy seat, and then you'd put your logbook under the carried with me, and I'd pull the pins and put it in because the seat sagged down and dropped where I could fit. And I was very fortunate in the A stars. I flew 350s, AS 350s, and I was fortunate because that had headroom, and I had to wear night vision goggles. And when you flip them suckers up, how did he get to fly an F-111 at 6'7"? Because I had to cheat the reality of the situation to get qualified to fly in the Army. I was literally too tall. My sitting height was too tall. And the guy giving me the test squashed on the top of my head and said, make sure you squat down as much as you can because they're not going to let you pass. So I don't know how somebody that tall would be able to do that because they don't make clothes for people that big, military. That's weird. But yeah, the F-14 had a bigger cockpit, but the helicopters, nope. So when you flip your goggles up, they're kind of up there in front of you. You're wearing a helmet and you're wearing these two little funky goggles, and I was very fortunate that they fit, that I fit with wearing them. Okay, whoa, whoa, slippery roads, slippery roads. Whoa, here we go. The old aardvark. You ever seen one of those Aero Coupe, that airplane with the H-tail? They made them in the late 40s, early 50s, an Aero Coupe. I looked in there, and I mean, a 10-year-old won't fit in that aircraft. It's so small inside. The seats don't adjust. They've actually got a pipe going across the backside. All right, now we're over here. And I always look for little airplanes. So Cessna 150, not a chance. 152, nope. Cessna 172. Whoa, what is that? It's a sign. Not so much. There's actually a small light plane that I fit in that surprised me, which I was at one time in my life considering getting. It's called a German flight design. And there was one at the airport, and a guy pulled it out of his hangar, and I literally asked him, can I sit in your plane to see if I fit? And I climbed in, and I could sit up in there. I was really surprised. And that was the plane I was kind of leaning towards buying at one point. Ultimately, it didn't happen, but that was the one, a German flight design. Alrighty. Why is this maneuver again here? Okay, I gotta see what my GPS is doing here. It's taking me Oh, it is taking me up 86. Okay, it's taking me to New York. Well, that's interesting. I thought I was doing the Pennsylvania run here. Okay, they're taking me up towards Scranton and then making me turn west. Interesting. I didn't think that was my route. I got to keep my eyes peeled. I'm coming down on a quarter tank of gas, and I got to see what's happening. Shoot, shoot. It's weird. It's lighter on the screen than it is looking out the window. Anyway, I just got a text came across my screen while we were screaming here. Like I said, I'm going to hang out with my cousin. He said he's got a boat trip planned for us, and I don't recall him having a boat. Yeah, it's like a conversation tall guys have with each other. Where is your height? Some people, well, some guys have it in their legs, and some have it in their body, and some freaks of nature have it in both. Mine's in my body. My height's on top, so that's why I have a lot of headroom problems. But like I said, I know for a fact the F-14 was designed for somebody 6 foot and above. Technically speaking, smaller guys make better fighter pilots because their body can take the G forces better. I mean, I haven't flown a fighter plane, but that's the just the design of the human body. Whoa, where'd this guy come from? All right, all right, all right. I'll get over it. This guy came up on me because he's in a rush. You go, girl. There you go. I'll get back over. Yeah, it's brighter on the screen than it is outside. It's almost like night vision. The guy I flew with in the Army was an electronics dude, not a pilot, but an electronics dude on an A6 intruder. And he was in the Navy and he flew, as part of the electronics package, he like flew in the back seat. And somehow he was able to apply for Army flight school and he got in and he was able to change service. I guess they let you do that. I don't know the rules, but he had recommended RBA 10. I think I've climbed into one of those, and if I sit up, I'm hitting the ceiling. I'm hitting the bubble. And I like kit planes. There are some rules about flying them overseas. Like if you want to go to Mexico or the Caribbean, I think there's some weird rules about that. But yeah, planes that you can modify, you can drop the seat. You can literally modify the fiberglass, drop the seat down into the floor, or do something like that. There was a plane that caught my attention called the Velocity. It looks like a long easy, but it's a four-seater. That one I thought was kind of cool. But I've officially retired from flying. If something weird happens and I go back to it, I'll probably go for the sport pilot. And I think the sport pilot is a class 3, which I don't think there's really any requirements to get a class 3 medical, to be honest with you. When they started harping at me about my class 1 based on my EKG, that's when I said, I'm done. Yeah, your heart's supposed to go diddle diddle bob. Mine went diddle diddle boop. They said, "Oh, this little thing right here. We don't like that." I went, "Okay, I'm good. I'm out." Have you ever seen a Republic CB? Pictures of them, black and white. I've seen them on 1950s TV shows. And here I am at the North Las Vegas airport, and there's one of those Republic CBs sitting there. For a second, we may start getting into reception issues. I don't know if it's the mountains or the. Oh, here we go. It's down to 57 degrees. Gotta love rain. Tell you what, I could just stay on 80, couldn't I? That's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay on 80. I know where I know how it rides. I don't want to go up by strength. All right. Lovely weather we're having. It's been raining all day. The ceilings are down. The trees are cut off. This GPS is trying to turn me north, and I think I'm going to stay west. I'm going to follow 80. Yes, we see your flashing lights. All right. Here we go. Open and close. All right, we're having a problem. All right, we're having a problem here. I'm losing reception. Again, I don't know if this is weather or otherwise, but I'm going to cut this off here, mainly because I'm tired of fighting with it. But I'll catch up with you guys later when I hope this works better. Later when I hope this works better.